All right. Well, hello and welcome everybody to the Modecast podcast. So it's a podcast powered by your friends over at Modeshift, and we chat about all things mobility. So thanks for joining us today. As always, I'm your host, Maxwell Mickey. But before we dive into today's episode, please make sure to subscribe, follow us on the preferred streaming platform wherever you like to watch podcasts, listen to them. But let's get started. So today, very exciting. Coming to us from Hawaii, we have John Andoh, who is the mass transit, mass transit administrator and
hmm
general manager. A little bit of a mouthful. Want to make sure I got that. But for the County of Hawaii Mass Transit System, or HILO. John, thanks for being on. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. And yourself?
Not too bad. Probably not as good of a time as your after work living in Hawaii. But we chatted a while back ago, John. You lived in Hawaii for many years, and then you kind of came back not too long ago, isn't that right?
Yeah, about 2 years ago.
Okay, nice. Is it good to kind of feel home? Do things change a lot? I think it sounds like paradise for everyone else. I'm sure you still have your day-to-day things that are just as frustrating or unfun to deal with as the rest of the transit folks. But how do you like being out there?
I mean, it's been pleasurable. The weather's great. The activities are fun. People are very friendly.
Well, one of the things we always love to ask about is kind of how you got into transit. So I know you've been with a few agencies, you've covered a lot, inside the country, but would love to hear kind of how you got into transit, where you've been. It's always great to have kind of a veteran on the show with us.
Yeah, so I've been managing transit for the past 23 years. Actually started doing internships while I was in high school and started managing transit at about 20. And I've lived in various states, running rural, small urban, and large urban transit systems across the country. I've been here in Hawaii County for about 2 years. In addition to my role in Hawaii County, I work part time in Escalon, California, and in Burlington, North Carolina, where I provide managerial support to their transit systems as well.
Okay, very nice. So how often do you have to kind of go between them, or are you able to do it all remote from Hawaii?
I do most of the work remotely, but I do go to them at least once a month,
Okay, very
a
nice.
couple
So
of
you're a
days.
frequent flyer.
Yes.
Who's the best airline if for anyone who wants to get out to Hawaii?
Oh gosh, they're all good. It just really depends on the price point.
Okay, all right, I like it. So very nice. So you've been with Hawaii for about 2 years now. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, very nice. I know we one of the big things we want to chat about today is kind of the fare free side, which we'll get to. But what were any kind of other big changes or shifts or anything like that that you kind of brought your experience with and adjusted when you got to Hilo?
Well, we've made some significant progress through implementation of the Transit and Multimodal Transportation Master Plan, which
Hmm.
guides basically the future of the agency. We've added various routes, extended times, van pool program, rural door-to-door bus, and we're about to launch a microtransit service in our largest subdivisions in the Kau and Puna districts.
Okay.
And we're about to restructure the shared ride taxi program, and we've expanded paratransit and also launched a van pool program and a bike share program.
Yeah, wow, a lot of things. For the micro transit side, did you kind of ask riders for surveys or collect data around like how do we, where do we deploy this? How frequently? Is it kind of a little bit of, testing and seeing what works? How did that process go?
When the master plan was done, that's when a lot of the feedback was gathered
Okay.
to determine the best modes for for the various areas of the island. And when that master plan was developed, the Puna and Kau districts were the most underserved areas with large population centers that needed some form of transit.
Okay.
Microtransit is a way to introduce transit to determine if fixed route makes sense in the future.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, and you have probably some unique challenges. Being in Hawaii, I think there's probably a handful of, areas of the country that, may have to deal with similar challenges. But, being a vacation destination and one of the most beautiful places in the world where people want to go. How does that affect, planning for, but we were chatting earlier, you said, spring break is all here. How does that affect planning for, service and things like that? Because it's something that I would assume is, very unique to Hawaii.
We plan for service normally like any other community.
Okay.
When we have peak demands on some of our routes, we'll add additional buses to ensure that we're moving people and not leaving folks behind. But beyond that, there's nothing really different that we do,
Okay.
except
Yeah,
that
good to know.
our period is more year round
Okay.
versus like a summer peak and a winter peak, like some agencies may be faced with that are visitor centric like us.
So when you came on, you made the decision to go fare free, and this was I believe during the pandemic. Was it the pandemic that kind of drove that decision? Was it something you were already interested in? Can you talk to us a little bit about how you and your staff and team came to that decision?
It was something that we were already interested in doing. Our ridership has tanked over the
Hmm.
last 10 years. That's just due to the reliability of the transit system. So we were looking for ways to rebuild the ridership and reintroduce public transit to the island. And with the implementation of the master plan, we felt that launching a fare free pilot as part of that is a great way to get people to consider transit as an alternative again, and
Hmm.
also allow low income residents to reinvest that money that would have went to the transit system back into the economy so that they can still be able to live in a comfortable manner while using our bus system.
That's a really interesting point. I've spoken to a few folks before, on the fare free, and actually I haven't seen much around that in particular. But the essentially stimulus into the local economy by not having to, spend money on public transit. Do you have any data around that, or is there any way to like evaluate kind of the economic impact? I know it'd probably take a lot of time, but
I mean, there's definitely a way to do it, but we don't have any data at this point. We're going
okay.
into our we're about just shy of 1 year of doing this fare free pilot, and so far we've seen a 43% increase in ridership over the previous year alone. And that, as you know, the previous fiscal year was the pandemic, so it's definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah, wow, that's a big jump. Was it how did you kind of communicate all of that to riders? Like, hey, we're turning the fares off. This is permanent, or at least semi-permanent for the time being. Like internal marketing team, or like getting news out in the press, just sharing things at you know bus stops and online, things like that. How did you really get that message across?
We focused on um, press releases, traditional media,
Okay.
signs on all the fare box saying we're going fare free, effective February 27 of 22, thanks to grants from the federal government. So just hop on and ride. And
Okay.
that basically was word of mouth that spread around. We also took advantage of social media, which
Hmm.
also helped for like the visitor community. So that was very helpful when like people come off planes or off boats and they realize, hey, I don't have to worry about spending money on the bus. And one thing to note is we get a large portion of our revenue from general excise tax, which is sales tax on retail.
Okay.
So that's when I go back to respending the money into the economy. We're going to see that money come back to the transit system anyway when they're spending at retail stores or at restaurants, grocery stores.
Oh, yeah, very interesting. I think that's a question a lot of folks ask too is, hey, this kind of works for now with, different subsidies, grants, things like that, but kind of preparing for, the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to keep the system fare free. Is that part of that plan? Is, hey, we'll see this coming back through, the economy?
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. What is there any other like sources or kind of on that long-term plan that maybe other agencies can think about
Well,
to try and be fare free?
we're fair free through December 31st of 2025.
Okay.
This is an opportunity to just see how it helps the transit system and how it helps the island. If the county sees good returns from being fare free, this pilot would become permanent.
Okay.
If not, then we are also building a contingency plan on reinstituting fares using electronic fare collection, which would take effect in January of 26.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, very nice. So do you have any advice for other agencies that are thinking about it, looking at it, things to consider, anything like that? I know there's a lot of folks trying to get to kind of where you are, but aren't certain on the path.
I would say look at how much you're spending on fare collection. That's one. Look at the complexity of your fare structure and look at your overall ridership and see is ridership declining or as a result, and look at how can you come up when you've done that analysis of those areas
Hmm.
I've mentioned, how can you come up with ways to rebuild ridership? Is fare free a consideration? If are you willing to give up X amount of dollars, whether covered through grants, private donations, or your existing budget to allow people to ride the transit system for free? In our case, it was $580,000 a year. That's like less than 5% of the overall revenues coming to support the agency. So small to where we were able to absorb that through the stimulus grants that FTAs provided. And perhaps in the future, general excise tax could cover that.
Okay. Yeah,
But
interesting.
some transit systems may have higher fare box recovery return ratios. It
Hmm.
might be a little more difficult to implement a program like this.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So what, when folks come to town and, they haven't ridden the system before, how do they see like, hey, here's where the bus is at, here's where it's going, the schedules, especially for visitors who, maybe they're only there for a week or two.
We have a new website where it actually is centric to the residents and the visitors so they can
Okay.
learn how to use the transit system. We are on Transit app and Move It app. We have GTFS or General Transit Feed specifications within Google, Bing, and Apple Maps. So when people are looking for alternatives, they can simply select transit and all of our routes will show up and it will show up as fare free. And that's kind of a way for people to be able to take advantage of our services.
Okay, wonderful. And so one of the hot button topics I think comes up a lot inside of the fare free world is how do we still collect as much data and information so that we can show our ridership, here, we receive our same grants, all of these, different mechanisms that fares typically, help with, from a, I don't know, secondary perspective. So what's kind of the focus on that to make sure you're still kind of collecting and retaining all the information that you need for planning and growth purposes.
Well, right now we're collecting the data manually. However, we're transitioning to using automatic passenger counters, which will help
Okay.
tremendously in getting stop by stop data and understanding where people are actually using the transit system. And then also the fare boxes that are already on the buses too. The drivers can count
Okay.
uh, those type of passengers, like whether they're general or senior or have a disability on the fare box. And for the interim, we can get reports until we transition fully to automatic passenger counters.
Okay. How long does that transition take
It's
to
going to
kind
take
of
about
implement?
3 years because as
Okay.
they buy new replacement buses, they will come with the APC technology.
Got it. Okay. Very nice. So what's on the docket is that sounds like it's, a big piece of kind of what's happening this year and the years following, but, what else is kind of on the docket this year for the system that you have plans to, grow or implement or anything like that?
Really more on the docket now is we're about 2 years and we want to see how the system is maturing.
Okay.
So it's more about evaluating its performance, making tweaks to make it continue to perform better, and eliminating services that don't make sense or reducing those services.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah. Well, this is wonderful. It's always great to hear and learn how, other agencies are, tackling, fare free, providing the same service or a better service, and seeing, of course, amazing results, right? Almost up
That's
50%
correct.
year over year. He said 43, which is quite incredible, especially with a lot of, I think, agencies struggling across North America. So our hats off. Great
Now,
work there.
one thing to note too is that eventually we're going to plateau,
Hmm.
and we're not likely going. We're going to continue to get new riders, but the increase is not going to be as great.
That's true.
Okay. So what generally has happened with fare-free systems that I've managed is you have really the existing ridership making more passenger trips, and then you're also increasing ridership from a newer demographic group as well. Once it plateaus, then it's really just people making those just more trips on the system, which ultimately is still reducing carbons from the air
Mhm.
and improving air quality.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Is there any way to kind of differentiate between those types of riderships or ridership?
Not unless you do a demographic survey
Yeah,
to
yeah,
extrapolate
figure.
that data.
Okay. Yeah, some very interesting and cool things that can be done while looking at, all these different types of way people move when it's fare free.
Sorry, say that last part again. I
Oh, no, I
apologize.
said it's very interesting to dive into the data and see, hey, this is how all these different types of people are moving and why, and trying to,
Oh,
fit that
yes.
together, as a puzzle piece.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It definitely can also just tell a story on how
Mhm.
people are utilizing the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wonderful, John. Thanks so much for having you on. And a quick random question. We'll end with maybe a fun fact or trivia in case your name ever comes up at a show. But if John Ando wasn't in public transit, what would he be doing?
My other passion is amusement park management,
Okay,
and I
that
would
is that's
run
quite a
a
bit different. Okay,
yeah run
well,
a
how'd you come
theme
about that?
park. While I was in high school, I did various supervisory roles at Paramount's Great America in Santa Clara, California, and Six Flags Marine World in Vallejo, California, since I'm from the Bay Area.
Okay,
And I also did transportation related work, like run the train around the park or the trolley in the entrance plaza. So yeah,
that's very cool.
and I
Well,
also
maybe
love
one
roller
day.
coasters, so it works
Yeah,
out.
maybe maybe one day we'll see you running both simultaneously, a transit agency that just takes people back and forth between, the amusement parks or their stops at different rides in a city. Maybe one day.
Well, Walt Disney already has it down pat, with trains, monorails, and trams and
That
boats.
is that is true.
So
Yeah. So maybe we'll expand that footprint. Very nice. Well, John, thanks so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, everybody, hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure, subscribe, get notified when we have a new episode that's posted. Please rate and review it. Let us know if you liked it or if you didn't, what we can do better. But again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you had some great takeaways. I'm Maxwell Mickey, and until next time, thanks everybody.
Thank you.